In every theater of human ambition, whether it is a medieval court, a modern boardroom, or even the quiet dynamics of personal relationships, there exists a figure more corrosive than the most obvious enemy. Not the rival who raises his sword openly, but the smiling saboteur, the toxic person. They arrive not with banners of war, but with subtle gestures of alliance. They laugh at your jokes, they flatter your decisions, they bring small gifts of loyalty. And while most see these gestures as signs of friendship, the strategist understands that every smile can be a dagger concealed, every favor a thread binding you to your own execution. Niccolò Machiavelli observed that the greatest dangers are rarely declared. They arrive masked, disguised, wrapped in courtesy. That is why toxic individuals are so lethal. They poison the bloodstream before the victim even realizes they have been cut. The toxic archetype thrives in ambiguity. Their strength is not force but infiltration. They are not wolves charging the gate, but termites hollowing the beams of a fortress from within. You do not see the damage at first glance. In fact, you may even feel stronger with them at your side, the way a tree strangled by ivy looks lush until you realize it is dying beneath the weight of its parasite. This is the theater where power is tested, not in open battlefields, but in subtle exchanges, whispered conversations, and alliances that seem harmless until the roots of corruption have spread too deep to be removed cleanly. Machiavelli's brilliance was not only in his understanding of armies and states, but of human behavior at its most deceptive. He knew that men rarely attack where they are strongest, they attack where they are weakest and where their opponent is blind. The toxic person's entire art is blindness. They convince you that their interests are yours, that their rise does not threaten yours, that their loyalty is genuine. And because most rulers, leaders, or even ordinary men crave loyalty, they fall prey to this performance. By the time suspicion arises, the poison is already in motion. You begin to notice the small criticisms, the subtle questioning of your authority, the hesitation of others who once stood firmly behind you. By then, it is too late. The dagger is already pressed against your throat. This is why Machiavelli did not preach kindness, patience, or forgiveness toward such individuals. He studied them, dissected them, understood their methods, and when the time came, he destroyed them without hesitation. He recognized that dealing with toxic people was not about morality, but about survival. Mercy toward corruption is cruelty toward yourself. To spare the weed is to sacrifice the garden. To allow the rot to remain is to sink the ship. In the cold logic of power, there is no middle ground. Either you cut, or you are consumed. This, then, is the battlefield we are entering, not one of swords and armies, but one of words, gestures, reputations, and shadows. And if you believe you can negotiate with poison, you are already dying. The toxic soul cannot be reasoned with, only contained, neutralized, and erased. The strategist who fails to recognize this truth will find their allies hesitating, their influence shrinking, and their enemies multiplying in the very places they thought safe. Machiavelli's law is not soft, it is brutal, but it is also final. When faced with poison, you do not sip slowly hoping to build immunity. You pour it out, crush the vessel, and salt the earth where it once was. Hesitation is the silent accomplice of every downfall. History is filled with rulers, generals, and men of influence who saw the shadow of betrayal but chose to wait. They told themselves it was paranoia. They told themselves perhaps the traitor could be redeemed. They told themselves the danger would resolve on its own. But in the delay between suspicion and decision, the poison spread. Machiavelli warned that corruption never appears as corruption, not at first. It comes dressed as loyalty, as friendship, as counsel. By the time the betrayal is undeniable, the knife is already pressed against the throat, and the ruler bleeds for his own delay. Think of the toxic person as rot in a wooden beam. At first it is invisible, hidden beneath the surface. The structure still looks solid, the weight still holds, but each day of hesitation allows the rot to deepen. Each moment of doubt corrodes the foundation. By the time the weakness is visible to the eye, the collapse is already inevitable. The Machiavellian mind refuses to wait for proof that the ordinary man demands. Proof is a luxury that comes too late. Action must come first. The cost of waiting is always greater than the cost of cutting too soon. Machiavelli would say, a ruler who hesitates is already conquered. The toxic person thrives in this hesitation because delay gives them time. Time to whisper doubts into the ears of your allies. Time to build alliances in the shadows. Time to turn your strength into isolation, your authority into fragility. With each day you postpone the decision, their confidence grows. They test the limits of what you will tolerate. They push the line further. And with every small victory they gain ground inside your walls until the fortress belongs to them. This is why decisive cuts are not cruelty. They are necessity. To the ordinary man it feels harsh to sever ties when the offense seems small, but the strategist knows that what begins as a whisper becomes a roar. What begins as a single weed becomes a field of corruption. What begins as a faint crack becomes a shattered wall. The ruler who waits for undeniable betrayal does not prove his fairness, he proves his weakness. And weakness is the one currency toxic people spend without limit. Machiavelli's law is simple. Remove the danger entirely before it gathers strength. Do not wound your enemy and leave him breathing. Do not cut halfway and hope the infection will heal. Strike deep enough that no piece of corruption remains to grow back. This is not just about removing a person, it is about erasing their influence, uprooting their alliances, dismantling the myth they hide behind. The ordinary man spares, hoping to save face. The strategist strikes, knowing that mercy to a traitor is cruelty to everyone who depends on his strength. Consider the captain of a ship. He discovers a single plank has begun to rot. It still holds, it still appears strong. The crew urges him not to overreact, but every wave, every gust of wind deepens the decay. By the time the hole appears, it is too late to repair. The ship is already sinking. This is how toxic people destroy leaders. They rely on hesitation. They know most men will not cut early. They know emotion will argue for patience. And so they thrive, not by force, but by your unwillingness to act. The Machiavellian ruler does not ask, what if I'm wrong to act too soon? He asks, what if I am destroyed because I acted too late? And in that question lies survival. To cut early may cost you an ally who was not yet a traitor. To cut late will cost you everything. The strategist embraces the brutal clarity. Hesitation is death, and decisive execution is life. This is the law of the cold strategist. One of Machiavelli's most ruthless insights is this: battles are not lost because the enemy is stronger. They are lost because the enemy controls the frame. The frame is the battlefield itself, the terms, the timing, the conditions under which conflict takes place. Toxic people understand this instinctively. They do not need to defeat you directly. They only need to pull you into their theater. They provoke you in public so that your defense looks like aggression. They disguise insults as jokes, forcing you to explain yourself and appear humorless. They leak fragments of misinformation, knowing you will scramble to put out fires while they stand back and watch. Each time you react on their terms, you surrender the battlefield. You are no longer the ruler of the story. You are a character trapped inside their script. Machiavelli would tell you that this is the first trap to avoid. The toxic person thrives when you step into their frame. They design chaos because chaos is their arena. Sudden confrontations, emotional explosions, unplanned arguments, these are moments where their tricks are strongest. They know how to twist words when emotions run high. They know how to appear calm while you look unhinged. They know that the crowd watching sees not the truth, but the performance, and if they can control the stage, they control perception. Power is perception, and perception belongs to the one who owns the frame. The Machiavellian mind never allows the enemy this luxury. To control the frame means you decide when the engagement begins and when it ends. You refuse to answer questions designed to trap you. You respond only at the time that benefits you. You choose the ground, the audience, the conditions. In doing so, you flip the roles. The toxic person who once thrived by provoking reaction is now forced to react to you. And the moment they are reactive instead of active, their power begins to unravel. Think of it as a chess match. The unskilled player moves in response to every attack, believing that staying alive means staying in the game. But the master understands that survival is not the goal, dominance is. If you are always responding, you are already losing. The skilled strategist creates a position where every move the opponent makes is dictated by traps they have already set. The opponent feels free, but in reality, every step leads closer to checkmate. Toxic people are no different. They want you reacting to their accusations, their lies, their provocations. They want you explaining yourself while they sit back shaping the narrative. But if you refuse, if you stay silent when they expect noise, if you answer only on your own terms, you strip them of momentum. Control of the frame is discipline. It means resisting the natural urge to respond immediately. A toxic person will say something outrageous, something deeply false, designed to light a fire in you. Every instinct screams to correct them, but the moment you correct them in their arena, the moment you shout in their theater, you have already lost. The audience sees only your fire, not their poison. Machiavelli would say, do not play their game. Build your own. Let silence work like a blade. Let timing serve as your weapon. Consider the metaphor of a stage. A toxic person is like a jester. Their trick's only powerful when the audience laughs, gasps, or reacts. If you stay silent, if you withhold the reaction, the stage collapses beneath them. Their performance crumbles, their energy turns desperate, and desperation breeds mistakes. This is how the strategist wins, not by playing louder, but by refusing to play at all until the rules belong entirely to him. Control also extends to information. Toxic people feed on knowledge. The more they know about your weaknesses, your thoughts, your plans, the sharper their attacks become. A wise ruler does not give a thief the keys to the treasury, nor does he give a liar the script to his next move. Starve them of information. Reveal only what strengthens your position. Force them to guess, and every time they guess wrong, they expose themselves. In Machiavelli's logic, ignorance is a prison. The less they know, the tighter the bars become. So remember this law: never fight on their ground. Never let them set the terms. Never let them pull you into their tempo. Decide the battlefield, dictate the rhythm, and when you speak, let it be with the weight of inevitability. Toxic people cannot survive in a frame they do not control. And once the frame belongs to you, the war is already won before the battle begins. Toxic people do not survive on logic. They do not thrive on truth. Their nourishment comes from something far more subtle: your emotions. Every reaction you give them, whether it is anger, frustration, or even compassion, is energy they convert into power. Machiavelli understood that the most dangerous adversaries are not the ones who strike openly, but the ones who know how to make you bleed yourself dry. And the way they do this is by keeping you emotionally entangled in their game. As long as you feel, they feed. This is why the most brutal and effective strategy is emotional starvation. To the ordinary mind, this sounds impossible. Humans are conditioned to respond, to defend, to explain, to protest. But the Machiavellian strategist rewires this instinct. He does not feed the fire, he smothers it with silence. Imagine a parasite that can only survive when its host provides warmth. Remove the warmth, and the parasite withers, not because you fought it directly, but because you deprived it of what it needs to exist. A toxic person operates under the same principle. The less attention you give them, the weaker they become. Silence in this context is not weakness, it is warfare. A toxic individual expects noise. They expect outrage, confrontation, desperate explanations. They prepare for your retaliation because it keeps them in the center of the drama. But when you respond with nothing, no rise in tone, no defensive argument, no visible shift in emotion, you deprive them of their oxygen. Suddenly, their stage collapses. The audience sees only them flailing, reaching for a reaction that never arrives. The silence becomes suffocating, and desperation begins to consume them. Consider the court jester. His entire identity relies on the laughter, groans, or gasps of the crowd. Without reaction, his jokes fall flat. His colors fade into irrelevance. He becomes nothing more than a man in rags. Toxic people function in the same way. When you refuse to react, when you give them no applause, no outrage, no emotional fuel, they begin to unravel. They push harder, becoming erratic, trying grander tricks to draw you back into the play. But the strategist remains unshakable. He knows that desperation always leads to mistakes, and when the toxic person makes those mistakes, Their mask slips, their tactics reveal themselves, and their influence corrodes. This is not easy. It requires discipline that most do not possess. Because the toxic will not simply vanish quietly. They will try every weapon. Apologies that seem sincere, promises to change, sudden bursts of vulnerability designed to trigger your compassion. They will say they regret everything, that they have been misunderstood, that they just want peace. The ordinary man believes these words and lowers his guard. But the strategist knows. These are not transformations, they are tactics. A toxic person apologizes not to change but to reset the game. Their tears are not repentance, they are bait. Machiavelli would warn, never confuse the performance of guilt with the reality of transformation. A toxic soul can imitate regret as easily as it can imitate loyalty. What matters is not what they say, but the pattern they repeat. And toxic people always repeat. They cannot help themselves. Deception is their instinct, manipulation their survival. Once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Once you recognize the strategy, you are immune to the act. This is why emotional starvation must be total. Not partial silence, not occasional withdrawal, but complete and unwavering composure. You speak less. You reveal less. You engage less. And in every interaction, you remain calm, distant, untouchable. The toxic person grows frantic, then reckless, then exposed. Others begin to notice their desperation, their erratic behavior, and the cracks in their image widen. By starving them of your emotional energy, you are not only protecting yourself, you are allowing their own mask to rot in front of the crowd. Machiavelli would call this the quiet execution. No public battle, no loud confrontation, no announcement of war. Simply a withdrawal of energy so complete that the enemy suffocates in irrelevance. This is cruelty only to them, but liberation for you. Because the moment you realize that toxic people cannot exist without your attention, you hold the ultimate weapon, the refusal to feed them. In silence lies power, and in composure lies victory. Machiavelli understood that the body of an enemy is never the real threat. It is the shadow they cast. A toxic person may be removed from your presence, but if their reputation remains intact, they will find new ground, new allies, and new victims. They can return with more strength, protected by the same illusion that once allowed them to infiltrate your defenses. This is why mere removal is not enough. To truly neutralize the threat, you must dismantle not only the person, but also the mask they wear. And in Machiavelli's cold logic, the destruction of reputation is more permanent than exile, more final than confrontation, and more devastating than any physical strike. Toxic individuals survive because others believe their facade. They cultivate images of loyalty, generosity, or charm. They position themselves as indispensable advisors, trusted friends, or pillars of the community. And this mask is their greatest armor. With it, they deflect accusations, twist narratives, and frame their opponents as paranoid, bitter, or unjust. Many rulers have fallen not because their accusations were false, but because their enemy's reputation was so carefully constructed that the truth appeared like slander. This is the battlefield Machiavelli forces us to recognize. War is not fought only with actions, but with perception. The Machiavellian approach is subtle but merciless. He would never confront a toxic adversary openly, in front of an audience prepared to defend them. That stage belongs to the enemy, and in their theater, truth becomes distorted. Instead, he would dismantle the mask quietly, piece by piece, letting the cracks widen until the entire facade collapses under its own weight. He would not rush. He would not announce his intent. He would wait for the toxic person's own actions to align with the truth he wished to reveal. And when that moment came, exposure would be undeniable. No excuses could stand. No defense could mask it, because the evidence was not accusation, it was revelation. This strategy is not slander. Lies are unstable weapons. They rot the hands of those who wield them. No, the Machiavellian cut is made with precision and truth. Not isolated incidents, but patterns. Not exaggerations, but undeniable facts. When others see the same betrayals you have seen, when the pattern is too consistent to be denied, the toxic individual collapses not under your words, but under the weight of their own behavior. This is the brilliance of dismantling reputation. It makes destruction appear natural, inevitable, and self-inflicted. Once reputation dies, power evaporates. Allies step back, fearful of being tied to a sinking ship. Supporters hesitate, whispering doubts where once they spoke loyalty. Even if the toxic person tries to rebuild, they find every door closed, every opportunity stained by the echo of their ruined image. Trust, once broken, is like shattered glass. It can be pieced together, but the fractures remain forever visible. They may still speak, but their words carry no weight. They may still move, but every step is watched with suspicion. A general without an army, a ruler without followers, a jester without an audience. This is the truest defeat. Machiavelli would caution, however, in dismantling another's reputation, your own must remain untouchable. If your actions appear vengeful, emotional, or petty, you invite doubt upon yourself. The strategist remains calm, factual, and composed. His exposure is not framed as destruction, but as protection of order, of stability, of the greater good. In this way, others not only accept the fall of the toxic person, they silently approve of it. They see you not as a destroyer, but as the guardian who preserved strength by cutting corruption from the body of power. And this is the final law. Wars are not won by forcing the enemy to retreat. They are won when the enemy has nowhere left to return to, when their name alone closes doors, when their presence inspires not trust but caution, when their memory brings not loyalty but warning. Only then can you be certain they will never rise again. To merely cut ties is mercy. To dismantle reputation is permanence. Toxic people are not accidents. They are predators. They thrive by exploiting hesitation, feeding on emotions, and hiding behind illusions. If you treat them with softness, you invite your own downfall. If you handle them with reason, you give them time to sharpen their knives. Machiavelli's path is cold, decisive, and final. Cut swiftly, starve completely, expose ruthlessly, and erase the mask that protects them. Because in this game of power, hesitation is death, and mercy toward the corrupt is cruelty toward yourself. The ordinary man survives toxic people by enduring them. The strategist conquers them by ensuring they can never return. That is the art of survival. That is the cold law of Machiavelli.